Hello and welcome, my fellow nerds, back to another edition of Totally Bored here at Nerd Inn, or if you're brand new, thank you so much for stopping by. I'm Christian, and I'll be your host for the evening, and tonight, I'm going to be telling you how to save yourself time, money, and heartbreak in the board gaming hobby. Let's get into it. Now, I just want to say, right off the bat, there is no worse feeling than getting a game you were so incredibly psyched about. You sat there, you looked at it, you thought this was going to be the perfect game for you. Months pass, and you still haven't played it. It's collecting dust on your shelf as nothing more than an art piece. And trust me, we've all been there, and if you haven't, you will be there. It is just part of the hobby. But I'm going to give you some tips to maybe help you avoid that in the future and get purchases you know are going to see play at your table. And the first thing I want to recommend to all of you is watching board game reviews. I know this is going to sound pretty obvious right off the bat, but hear me out for just a second. And of course, if you want to see any reviews on our favorite games here on the channel, those are going to be coming out in the near future, but this is neither here nor there. When it comes to watching reviews, I want you to watch more than one review for a game. If there's a game you're kind of eyeballing, go and watch 3 or 4 different reviews on it from different people to get different takes. They could be people that you like, that's perfectly fine, because if they're people that you like and they're into the same types of games that you are, their reviews are going to hold a decent amount of weight to you, and that is just going to hold true. But if you get multiple perspectives, you can kind of get more information about the game and get more knowledge as to whether or not it's actually something you are going to enjoy playing and is going to be a good fit for you. So, part 1, watch a lot of reviews on it, or at least a few if that's all the time you have. My next recommendation is actually to watch how to play videos. It's one thing to watch reviews and get people's takes on it after they've played the game, but not a lot of reviewers give you a whole lot on how the game plays. They'll give you bits and pieces, overall mechanics, rough things like that, but watching an actual how to play or a playthrough will show you step by step how the game works and tell you whether or not that is actually something you enjoy. And honestly, there's a lot of times, too, where watching one of those and seeing the full table presence of a game, the full scope of it all laid out, has really changed my mind on it and been like, well, that's a bit of a beast to set up. I don't know if that's really going to be something I want to do on my own, and I know that my friend group isn't going to be a huge fan of that, so maybe that's something I can steer away from. So watching how to plays really helps you break down a lot of different things. Again, it lets you see the full scope of how the game plays. It takes biases out of it completely, and you just see how the game functions and know whether or not that style is for you. If you've developed a taste for board games, you're going to know the things you do and don't like. And if there's too many things in that game that you don't like, mechanism-wise, theme-wise, however, if there's too much in there that you don't care for, steer clear of it. And not only that, you might think a game is something else on the surface, just doing kind of quick cursory glances at it, but if you take that deeper dive into it, you might realize it's something totally different. Something I wish I did when I bought Casting Shadows. If you watch my board game collection, you know the whole deal with that, but I thought it was a completely different game than what it was, and while I wasn't disappointed after buying it, it still wasn't what I expected, so having gone through that would have been a lot better for me. And my next tip is to find your board game on Board Game Geek, a place with just so much information about everything board games, including detailed descriptions of the games, forums from people that have played it and have information on it, tons of stuff you should check out. You're going to find a ton of different things there, whether it's confusing rule questions or complaints about the game or comments about loving the game. There's a whole lot of different information you can get on BGG that you don't always find on reviews or how to play, so it kind of fills in those gaps for you. Check out the ratings while you're there, see the player ratings, because you're going to get a ton of people that go and put their input on it. Do be careful that some of those are going to be skewed, especially if they're like Kickstarter-backed games. People might leave negative reviews if their Kickstarter never showed up, things like that. It's things that are totally unrelated to the game. So do keep that in mind. Maybe read through some of the reviews and see if there's negative stuff, why there's negative things there, and kind of get a reading for that. But you can also look at the BGG recommended. There's usually a recommended player count on there. If it's a multiplayer game, people will usually go and say, oh, this game can play 1 to 6, but it's usually best at like 2 to 4, etc. And there's just a ton of information on BGG. If it's not a resource you're already using when it comes to looking at and buying games, you're just doing it entirely wrong. So if you've done the first 2 steps and you've completely neglected this one, go look on Board Game Geek. It will help you out a ton. Moving on down the list, the next idea is to test it. If you have a way to get a copy of the game in your hands, this is bar none the best way to know if that is a game you actually want to own. So you can check with friends that are into the hobby. You can check with your local game shop. They usually have games on the shelves that are already open and are available to play. If you have a board game cafe, that's also a great place to look. There's a ton of different options for you to look and be able to try and see if there's a copy you can just test out and play before actually committing to it. But if that fails, you can also look on Board Game Arena. If you don't already have a subscription there, you don't necessarily need one. There's a lot of games that you can hop in and play for free. However, to start a lot of games, you are going to need that subscription. So just be on the lookout, see if you can find people's games to join in. It'll let you experience the game a little more at your own pace, but also still get an understanding of what it is. And I find that to be a pretty good resource as well if you can't find any physical copies. If you're like me and you live in a very small town and there's not a huge access to board games, then that is definitely something to be wary of and think about, is something like Board Game Arena. And if you can afford the subscription and you like the idea, maybe it's something to consider. I haven't bought one myself, but do some research into that as well and see if that might be something to help you out. It could be an investment to save you from making bad ones. Moving on through the list, the next thing I would recommend is going to conventions. If you have the option to do this, I know it's a bit pricier and not necessarily available to everyone. I've only been to one myself, and it was a very small convention, so there wasn't a whole lot to it going on. I'm talking like 50 people max when I was there. But it was still a good time. It was nice to meet new people. But if you can go to a decent-sized board game convention, you will find a lot of groups there that will have games, and you might stumble across ones that you've been looking at, or even discover new ones that you can sit down with a group and play. And a lot of the time, there's going to be teachers that are there ready to teach and show off those games to let people learn and experience them. And along with that, there's also usually copies of those games for sale if they're related to a store. So I recommend that for that, but also just to get the experience of going to a convention. So I recommend it for that, but also just for the experience of going to a convention in general. You get to meet a ton of new people, experience a lot of new games, and just go adventure for a while. It's nothing but a good time, and if you are able to, I would definitely recommend trying to attend one, but I know that this option is not necessarily available for everyone, and that is totally fine. Now, this next one actually pertains to me quite a bit, and that is checking for availability. Generally speaking, if a game is harder to get a hold of, it's something I'm more likely to drop from my list in search of games that I'm going to be able to find and find affordably. The only exception I've made to this so far was actually Conservus. I was not able to find a copy of this anywhere. I scoured online. I did find a few, but they were all either way too expensive or were going to cost me an arm and a leg on shipping due to where I am. So it wasn't really feasible, but I did look on Board Game Geek and I found somebody that was selling a copy that was like new, and that was the one exception I made to that. I hunted and scoured for this game because of how much I knew I wanted it. And I am very happy with this purchase. It is a very good game. I have enjoyed every second of it, but it's not something I do very often. For example, recently I've been looking into trying to find Mycelium. Again, if you've watched my board game collection, you'll know what I'm talking about. I've tried so hard to find this game. I can't come across it anywhere. I found a couple of copies on BGG, but they're just... it's not enough for me to warrant going through that option, and I'm kind of just dropping it from my wish list in lieu of other games that are more readily available that I can get very quickly. So that is something to keep in mind. It's more of a minor thing, but if you're having too much trouble finding a game and you're having to jump through all these hoops and spend extra money to do it, it's probably not going to be worth it. I would recommend going further down your list and finding something else. I'm going to make a lot of people mad with what I'm about to say next, and this tip is know your price range. And I'm still reflecting and learning on this one myself. You need to know what kind of budget you have when it comes to shopping for board games and whether or not it's something you can actually afford. If you have to choose between putting food on the table and getting a board game, focus on yourself first and then go to board games. And I've tapered myself back a lot with that in these last couple of months to make sure that I'm not overspending on this stuff, because it was very easy to do so at the beginning. You get very hooked into it. You just want to fill your shelf with all these games. And I still have a ton of empty space on my shelves that I plan on filling in the future. but I have time to do it. I have to take care of myself first. I'll enjoy what I have, and I'll work on filling up the rest of that space later. Trust me, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You will get there eventually. Just let it happen and make sure that everything over here is good first before you go and get more board games. And for our last tip now, my last recommendation before buying a board game to know whether or not it's actually worth getting is holding it. And I mean, like, seriously, if you are in the store or you're in your LGS, grab the box, hold it up in front of you, examine it, take some time, look over it, look around the outsides, inspect every inch of this thing. Take time. Take like 5 minutes just examining the box, not saying a word, just looking at it, feeling it in your hands, and getting an experience with it. There is a lot of instant gut reactions, a lot of instant heart-related actions to seeing a beautiful game and just instantly wanting it. This is a game my wife and I had eyes on for a while. We weren't quite sure we wanted to get it. We held off on it, and well, my parents went and bought it, and they love it. It was great. It's a great experience. I never stopped to actually hold this. I looked at it for a few seconds. I'd pick it up, I'd look at it, go, there's something else over here, and put it back down. I didn't stop to investigate this game, and if I had dug a little deeper and I'd actually sat and stared at it and just felt it, just been in its presence, I think I would have picked up on it sooner. But I have been able to play it now thanks to them. I could borrow it from them anytime, which is wonderful. Thank you to my mom for picking out that game. It is absolutely beautiful. But holding a game just creates such a different experience. It's one thing to look at a game and, like I said, just do a quick grab, do a quick glance, and say, oh, that looks cool. Studying it will let you fill in a lot of different information on the game, and it will really sink into you. And on more of an emotional than a logical level. I know this probably sounds a bit silly, but just having that in your hands, being able to just look at it and say, yeah, I can see that on my table. I can see this being an excellent time. I've done all the research on it. I've seen what it looks like, and now I can feel it in my hands, and it just feels right. And that's ultimately what you're looking for in the end, is finding something that just feels right. Because if it doesn't end up feeling right, it's not going to get played, and it's going to collect dust. So, while it is one thing to do all this research and get all the surface level stuff, there is just something extra to being able to hold that box in your hands and just know it's meant to be. Now, in the case of online shopping, I'm sorry, you're a little bit screwed there, but you can still do a lot of the same things. You can repeat the steps I mentioned at the beginning, looking at reviews, looking at how to plays. You can just keep studying it for a while, or you can even throw it in your shopping cart. And this is what I do a lot with just general shopping. I will throw it in my shopping cart and close the app. I won't even think about it or look at it until at least I have gone to bed again. So if I look at it at like 9 o'clock at night, it's in my cart, I will put my phone away, throw it on the charger, I'll go to bed, and then I'll wake up the next day with a more refreshed mind, with a more clear state of mind, and I'll be able to assess, is this actually worth getting? And a lot of the times it ends up being a no, but those times that it's a yes, you've had that chance to sleep on it, you've let it stew in the back of your mind while not actively thinking about it, that usually will help you, especially if your instant reaction is one of just pure excitement. That is a good sign that this game might just be for you. So guys, that's all the tips I have on how to save yourself a lot of money in the board gaming hobby and a lot of time in the long run. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If there's any other suggestions you want to recommend to people working on their collection, leave those down there as well. We always love your guys' input. If the content was helpful to you, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below. We really appreciate all of your support, and we look forward to seeing you guys all in our next video. As always, we hope you enjoy your stay. Peace out.